In this video, I'm going to walk you through the steps to make homemade bread using a KitchenAid mixer or a Cuisinart or whatever kind of dough mixer that you might have. You can also do it by hand. You just need to knead your dough for about 8 minutes. Follow along and I'll show you how I do it. To get started, I'm going to add 2 cups of lukewarm water to my measuring jug. I'm going to add a half a tablespoon of sugar and a half a tablespoon of dry active yeast. I'm just going to set that aside. I'm not going to stir it or anything. You can stir it if you like. Just put it to the side. Next, I'm going to measure out my dry ingredients. I use 5 cups of all-purpose flour. I level off the cups so I get exactly 5 cups. I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of salt and 1/2 of a tablespoon of sugar. I'm also going to add in about 2 tablespoons of lard. That, when it's weighed, it measures exactly 1 ounce. I'm going to turn that on a speed of about 1 now just to get the sugar and the salt mixed through the flour. It's not going to do much with the lard. If you're doing this in a bowl by hand, you can just give it a good stir with a wooden spoon. So after about 10 minutes or so, our yeast mixture is bubbly. Just going to give that a stir around to get it all mixed through the water. I'm going to turn my mixer on a speed of about 1 now. You don't want it too high because it will send flour flying all over the place. So we're just going to slowly add that in just to get it mixed through. It's going to take a while for all the flour to get incorporated. Get as much out of that jug as you can. That yeast is going to make your bread really nice and fluffy. So after a minute or so, all of the flour is going to get mixed into the mixture, and you're not going to have any risk of flying the flour all up in your face. You can turn it up to a speed of 2. And when that gets it formed into a ball, then you can turn it up to a little bit higher speed. I usually go around 3.5. If you're mixing this by hand, you want to have it on a clean surface with a lot of flour, and keep your hands floured and just keep kneading it until it forms into a nice smooth ball. So this is where I add about a tablespoon of olive oil. That's going to come in really handy when you go to take this off the dough hook. Also, if you're doing it by hand, you can put a bit of olive oil on your hands. It'll really help in the handling of the dough. Just taking it off the mixer there now, remove the dough hook, and I've transferred it to a different bowl. You could leave it in the same bowl as the mixer if that's all you're doing, but I need my mixer for another project after this, so I take it out and put it into a different bowl. Just going to shape it into a nice even ball. Give it a little poke, give it a little blessing. Just going to cover that now with a bit of plastic wrap. I'm going to take it and set it aside in a warm place so it can rise. Most bread recipes and videos you see tell you to put it aside and let it double in size. I leave mine longer than that, probably about 2 hours. I like it to be tripled in size. That's what works for me. My bread comes out perfect every time. So we're just going to put that aside now until it fills up the best part of that bowl. So the dough is risen nicely. We're going to remove that plastic wrap now, and we're just going to haul it to the side and punch some of that air out of it. You see how much air is actually in it. Just give it a good punch. Knock all that air back. Once you get that done, you can cover it up with plastic wrap again, and we're going to set it aside and do the exact same thing. When your dough is risen again, you need to grease your pans. I use lard to grease mine, and I greased them very generously. I never have an issue getting them out of the pans after they're baked. I use a piece of parchment paper and just rub it on there very, very generously. These pans are at least 80 years old. I bought them off the lady across the street when she was selling her house, and best purchase I ever made. So after about another 2 hours, your dough is going to be very well risen again. You're just going to knock all the air out of that. Get as much out as you can. You don't want any large air bubbles left in it. Just going to grab a knife now and start cutting the buns. In Newfoundland, we like what we call 3-bun bread. I noticed that a lot of other videos I've seen on bread, they just use 1 bun in each pan, but we like the 3-bun. So just cut that into 6 equal pieces, and we'll shape out 3 buns per pan. Sometimes it's hard to get them exactly the same size, but if I have some that's a little bigger than the others, I always try to stick that one in the middle. I really love the 3-bun bread because when you tear the buns apart and cut off the slice that was attached to the other bun. That's my favorite piece of bread out of the whole loaf. Now that your buns are formed, you take a piece of plastic wrap and put over top of those 2 pans of bread. And we're just going to let those rise again now for another hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on how warm your kitchen is. We want those buns to come up to the top of the pan or a little bit over the pan before we put them in the oven. So the dough's risen again. It's the top of the buns are just about to the top of the pans. By the time I get my oven preheated, this will be ready to go in the oven. I'm going to bake these off at 410 degrees for about 35 minutes. So the 35 minutes is up now. I got my cooling rack and my butter and my little brush all ready to go. Just going to haul that bread out of the oven there now. It's really nice and golden brown. That's what you're looking for. So before I take this bread out of the pans, I'm just going to give the tops of it a good brush with a bit of butter. That keeps your top crust from cracking. If you don't get it buttered right away, usually the crust will crack on you. And doesn't affect the bread, doesn't affect the taste, but doesn't look very nice. So we like our bread to look really, really good. So now it's time to take the bread out of the pans. Just invert them and the bread should come out really, really easily if you have greased your pan sufficiently enough with the lard. So as soon as you take that bread out of the pans now, you want to hit them with the butter right away. It helps soften the crust. It keeps it from cracking. It's really an important step when you're doing the bread. Do all the sides, the ends, the bottoms, and then finally give the tops another little touch of butter. I probably shouldn't do this until they're cooled, but I love to tear open the buns while they're still hot so I can see the steam coming out of them and see how nice and flaky and fluffy this bread is. It's my favorite bread recipe. Works for me great every time. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to my channel. Hit the like button and leave us a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Thank you for watching.